sport and the Centaur question. I know what you're going to think. It's the most ludicrously pretentious of titles. But I do actually rather like the idea, and indeed the danger that a centaur, the mythical creature that's half man, half horse, and make this work, whoops, there he is, a centaur, half man, horse, brings with him or her, because they're actually female centaurs, they were called, and I'm not making this up, they were called centaur rides. Anyway, be that as it may. And I haven't got a picture of them, I'm afraid, but, or there were a few, but they didn't have their shirts on, so I'm not. There are also some very bad centaurs. If you make the trip from here, which I strongly advise, from here up Knightsbridge to Piccadilly to the Royal Academy, to the Bronze Exhibition, you'll find a fantastic sculpture of Nessus. Here he is. Nessus, the naughtiest centaur of all, he tried to get off with the she's called Deianaria. She was the wife of Hercules, the strongest man in mythology, and for Nessus it was a bad mistake. Yet the idea that man and horse should be as one remains for me an abiding image when I've seen the great riders in action. And I've really been incredibly lucky. I've watched the likes of what we'll call the real life centaurs. I mean, just to list there, you know them all, but I mean, Lester Piggott, he spoke more like a horse than a human, but I can tell you, he could do things. He could talk to horses in an extraordinary way. Ryan Moore up there, just because Ryan Moore's not very outgoing in public and is still in his 20s, he's a wonderful, wonderful rider. He's winning on Workforce in the Derby. Tony McCoy in the middle, just because he's so committed and tough and strong, you don't know quite how much empathy and understanding he has of horses. On the top right there, John Frankham, no one I've ever seen was able to present a horse at racing pace at a fence the way he does. And he's still doing it, still schooling in the mornings, and he's 60 next month. Down to the left, well, Michael Whitaker, he doesn't speak an awful lot more than the rest of Piggott, but he also can talk to horses. David Broom come down the back, the hero of my youth. When he won the World Championship, it's because the others couldn't ride one side of Sunsalve, his horse. And then, of course, Catherine Dugin in the centre, the Queen of Greenwich. Look at it again on YouTube, which I did yesterday. It's just wonderful. Then the two long-legged centaurs, William Fox Pitt and the, what was he called, the Horseman of the Century, Mark Todd. When you see them wrapped around a horse, you can think they're centaurs. But all of them, Catherine most recently, they've done things on horses that can be so close to perfection that sometimes you can think that almost their destinies intertwined. But let's get to the point. What's a centaur question? And more important, what should our answer to it be? The question is, how much should the top half of the centaur share the same fate as the bottom, particularly when things don't work out? They certainly didn't always do for me. That is, on the right, you shouldn't know, me about to hit the deck at Cheltenham. That is New Year's Day, 1966. I did have some good days riding, but I have to tell you that I'm not sure if they ever described me as a centaur too often. However, I was unbelievably lucky to have had a stage in my life when riding horses, and in my case, racing them, was at the very center of my being. In every sense, it was what I lived for. And even now, more than 40 years on, there isn't a day goes by when I don't, for fleeting moments, remember the thrill of winging down the railway fences at Sandown or picking the field up as you wind through them at Newbury halfway through. But before and now, long after I lived as a professional jockey, I've also been lucky enough to ride horses of all sorts of disciplines all over the world. And for the last 20 years, I've had an old racehorse at home and who I've made several films. Here he is on the left. Alphard, or Alfie as we call him, and I tell you what, when I did the films, it's only time as a TV presenter when I knew I looked good on camera. Well, I didn't, but the bottom half of the centaur, he looked terrific. He used to canter up and he'd stand with his ears pricked, and the camera always said, wow, all I had to do was to keep out of the way. Alphard, or Alfie as we call him, won 2 races for Henry Cecil in 1982, and to borrow one of Sir Henry's favourite phrases, he's become one of my best friends. Yet, he is still a horse. He deserves to be treated and respected as a horse, and much as I love him, it's my responsibility what he does each day. Indeed, it'll be my decision when his days should be over. And when that happens, as I have with all my horses, I will look into his eyes until the moment the slaughterman's bullet sends his soul into oblivion. And if that sounds harsh, it is deliberately so. Because I believe that anthropomorphism is one of the big dangers in getting a proper perspective on what we do with welfare, with horses, and in particular, with horses in sport. Anthropomorphism is a long word, but it's a crucially important one. It means treating animals as humans, and it clogs up common sense with sentimentality. It always means well, but it leads into the impossible question, how would you like it if? In simplest terms, its logic leads to giving animals the vote. Of course, people like me are part of the problem. And no kidding. On page and screen, we try and personalize horses to get them closer to the public. Why should we be surprised then when the public react negatively when they find that the new four-legged people they are empathizing with are just being treated as animals after all? These are very difficult questions. We need to avoid the hypocrisy which often accompanies the answers, just as, except for the sincerest soil milk drinking, plastic shoe wearing vegetarian, most of us happily wolf down beef, lamb and chicken without letting our minds rest on the basic fact that the animals we like to look at in the field or in the chicken run are only actually there for our dinner plates or for our walking shoes. In Britain, at least, we don't rear horses for meat, although there's a fair level of hypocrisy in that. We do use them in sport, and we must not pretend either they always want to do what we ask them, or that what we do together does not carry risks at times, and you know what I'm coming to. Those risks sometimes can be dramatic. Yes, I've ridden in the Grand National too. That's me on the left, amazingly. Jumping the chair fence, a horse called Time. The winner, J. Trump, is here in the foreground, ridden by Tommy Smith, who I saw 2 months ago. Sadly, he's absolutely crippled like this, but his mind is perfect. He can do emails and things, but he can't move at all like that. And that was at full riding 6 years ago. Everything else had gone fine. But after that first circuit, I had my own dreams of being a centaur. My horse Time was in a beautiful rhythm. He'd skipped over the chairs. It was just an upturned dandy brush. But we only had 4 more fences to dream. For some reason, he got absolutely slap into the guardrail on the big open ditch. He did the most spectacular, big horse, spectacular somersaults. Fortunately, Time escaped without a scratch. I was off to hospital with a wing down. It's a sobering thought that if I'd been a horse, euthanasia would have been the only option. It's equally sobering that somersaults like Time took can end things there and then, as they did so crashingly for Dorney's Gate at Beachersbrook 2 years ago. The thought that this thing not only could happen, but at times will happen, is one that none of us who still proclaim to love the game as well as loving horses should ever lightly dismiss. But I believe there is nothing wrong in accepting the challenge, provided you've done everything possible to equip yourself and your horse to face what lies ahead. There comes a stage, and I think we've now reached it with the Grand National, where the emphasis should not be on lessening the danger, should be on ensuring that everyone fully realizes what they're up against. You don't lower the Matterhorn, but you sure as hell try and get better at mountaineering. And accidents, as we all know, will always happen to horses. I've had one impaled and dead in the field. I saw a horse snap a foreleg clean into a ridgen furrow at hunting. And amongst quite a few fatalities I remember riding as a jockey, I still remember Ophelia at Kempton suddenly go like a punctured car when her leg gave way on the flat. In all these cases, the word euthanasia is an important one. And I'm very much against those whose attitude is to prolong life at all costs. The horse is a sentient creature, but they have no imagination. What we owe them is the best we can manage while they are in our care. If we cannot ensure them another role in life, and thoroughbreds are actually very lucky to be at the top of the second life tree, if we can't do that, we're much better off ending life for them. Horses nowadays only come into the world because we planned to bring them there. Don't start shirking responsibility when it's time to take them out. So, my answer to the Centaur question and my plea to this conference and to all who keep and ride horses is to care for and respect them as horses, not to saddle them up with the extra hassles of pretending that they should think and feel like humankind. If we embark on the anthropomorphic route, we deserve a bit of what Nessus got from Hercules. Thank you. Do we take questions?
Perhaps got time for just one question. There is one. Yes, there's one there.
Mark Kennedy, World Society for the Protection of Animals. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I would like to reinforce or make the point that it is not anthropomorphic to discuss levels of risk. And very often when we talk about jump racing, for example, or the Grand National, we often hear the argument that horses can break a leg out in the field and can be injured out hacking. But of course, the issue which needs to be debated is the level of risk that we expose horses to. And I don't think it's anthropomorphic to debate and indeed be concerned about the level of risk that we may expose horses to in various disciplines. And the research over the years has made it very clear that the risk in jump racing, and indeed, of course, the risk in the Grand National in particular, is significantly greater than many other equestrian sports. For example, flat racing, which has a much lower level of risk of injury to the animal. So I do think, while we acknowledge that the use of horses does not come without risk, it's impossible to use horses without exposing them to some level of risk, we should still be very prepared to discuss what is an acceptable level of risk.
With respect, that's exactly what we do. But I'm saying, it is my opinion, I'm speaking myself, that's why I use the Matterhorn in mountaineering. If you don't want to climb the Matterhorn, go and climb something lower. But I think that the Grand National is about the height it should be now. The way, I mean, there'll still be risk. Of course, steeplechasing is riskier than flat racing. I mean, crikey, I've done a war. I mean, it is probably the highest level of risk. But again, are we going to just say there should be no risks in life? Life is not risk-free zone. And I'm sorry, but I will return to my ludicrously Edwardian grandfather who did sort of win the war on his horse Warrior. He wrote this wonderful book called Fear and Be Slain, and the first line was "Safety first is a vile motto." Anyway.